Hi, I'm Arnav from FRC Team 4930, The Electric Mayhem. In this video, I'm going to go over how to create a scouting app for any year's game using a design template I've created and put on GitHub. For this project, I recommend having at least a basic understanding of how to use HTML, Bootstrap, and JavaScript. The first thing you need to do is have a Gmail account. I've created one for our team right here, which I will use in this demo, and students can use for future apps as well. The reason why you need a Gmail account is so that you can use Google's free service, Firebase. Firebase is a platform which allows developers to host websites and apps for free and have a backend server and database. I'm now going to navigate to the Firebase web console right here. The first thing we need to do is create a project. For the project name, input the year of the game. I'm going to create an app for 2016's game, and then you should input the program you're building it for, either FRC or FTC, and then put the word scouting. Now you can just agree to all the things listed to continue. This is the web console for Firebase. There's lots of features and I'll explain some of those later. Right now we need to set up our program as a mobile web app. We're going to give it the same nickname as the project name, which for me is 2016 FRC Scouting. We also want to use Firebase for hosting our website, so be sure to check off that box. The code shown here is already in the template for the Scouting app, but it may need to be updated as the years progress. This command line tool we will use later in the tutorial. I'll explain how to use these commands later in the video. The next step is to set up a database for our Firebase project for the app to use. We want to start in test mode for creating the app. These rules can be changed later. Click any server to use for storage. I will use this one. When this is done loading, you will see an empty database for a Firebase project. The app will automatically fill this up as data is collected. These are the default rules set for test mode. The app will stop working past this date, so we need to change the rules before then. In this section, you can see the usage of the app. It will be important during competition for someone to keep an eye on the reads to make sure that we don't go over the daily quota. Otherwise, the app will stop working. The quota resets each day, so just make sure for the competition day we don't go over. If you don't already have npm installed on your system, install it now, just by following the link I'm going on. Installing Node.js will install npm as well. I'm not going to install it because I already have it on my system, but for everyone else, just click this link. To check if you have it installed properly, just run these commands in terminal. We are now ready to start programming our Firebase project. Create a new folder with the name of the project. For me, it's 2016 FRC Scouting. Then open up an IDE to program the project in. I like to use Visual Studio Code. Open the folder you made. And now in terminal, we are going to use npm to install the Firebase tool. The following command was listed earlier when we were setting up our Firebase project. It will set up all the necessary Firebase tools for us to use. Once that's installed, you need to log into the same Gmail you use for the Firebase project. Just type Firebase login and follow the steps prompted. Now we're going to initialize the project using the command firebase init. The app uses Firebase Firestore, functions, hosting, and you can use emulators for testing the app. I've never really used them, but I encourage others to learn how. Then link this project to the one we just created in the console. You can hit enter for just about everything that you get prompted with. You can select functions, Firestore, and hosting for the emulators. Once you are done, you will see a bunch of files appear. In the public folder, there should be index.html and 404.html. These two files will get overwritten by the template I've created. In the functions folder, there should be an index.js file. This will also get overwritten. We can now finally download the scouting template. Go onto Nicholas' GitHub and navigate to the repo. And to download, just hit the green button labeled download. Be sure as you go through the project on your own to read through all the instructions I've written out on the repo. It'll be in the downloaded project as well. The first instruction written is to copy this code into the Firebase.json file that's already loaded in. So we can just navigate there and place it right exactly where I'm putting it. Now if you go into your downloads and open up the newly downloaded zip file, we can open that up and open up our project as well. I'll navigate there right now. So open up the project, and then whatever is written inside the client side code folder goes inside the public folder of our project. So you can just copy all that into your public folder of the project. Now these two files will be overwritten, so that's fine. Now we're going to do the same thing for the server side code, and this code goes inside the functions folder of the project. So right here. And when I do this, index.js will be asked to be overwritten, and that's fine. I'm going to move back the readmes because they're not necessary for the project, but be sure to keep them in a place where you'll remember so you can read them if you need to. All the content in the readmes also exist within the code itself as comments and also within the GitHub repo. If you open up your project again, you'll see all the files have been added to the project. All these same files here should be in your project. Now throughout each step of this process, I suggest you read through the instructions. In the client-side code folder is the README for what files need to be changed. And then the server-side code lists the methods which you need to change. You also need to set up an environmental variable for the blue lines hotkey, which I'll explain how to do right now. The Blue Lines is a major resource for all FRC teams. It provides people with information about events and teams, and is also how the Scouting app gets its initial data. Right now I'm going to log into my Blue Lines account. If you don't have one, it's very easy to make. Just go on the website and follow the instructions. And once you do that, you can log in like this. Once you're logged in, navigate to your account's main page. You can do that like so. Now on your dashboard, navigate to the section that says Read API Keys. To create an API key, just type in the description. I'm going to put in the Scouting app's name, and then hit Add New Key. This is the key we're going to use in our Scouting app. Now if you go back to the template, it has instructions on how to add the Blue Lines key. You can just copy the function I've written and paste it into the terminal of your project. Replace the portion that says the TBA API key with the actual key that you got from the Blue Lines. And then hit enter. And if you get this message, that means you are all good to go. Adding note for anyone that noticed, that command I copied incorrectly spelled the word key. I fixed that in the instructions and in my code off screen as well. We can finally begin editing the app's code. As you go through this, follow the instructions each step of the way. The first step is to edit the server-side code. Inside the server-side code, edit the getEmptyMatchData method. All the server code can be found in index.js. Methods right here, and please read through all the instructions before you start editing. This is the part you edit. I suggest having created a paper scouting app beforehand so you know what you want your app to look like, and also have the instructions for that year open as you go and edit. In this method, you want to put each task in its corresponding gameplay section. So for 2016 in auto, there was a reach defense portion of the game. So that's what I'm putting in. When you write this, it should be clear what each task is. If you have to use multiple words to describe a task, do so by using an underscore to separate words. You're going to want to do this for auto, teleop, and endgame, and I've also added a special section called performance. In performance can go any extra information you need to know about a robot. This can be as if a robot's playing a defense, if the robot was a no-show, or any other extra information about a particular year's game. As you go through this, do not remove the score attribute from any of the game periods, nor the total score attribute. The performance section purposely does not have a score attribute. That is fine. I finished putting in all the information for the 2016 game. You'll see here in the performance section, for anyone familiar with the game, none of these defenses were required for a robot to do, but I think it would be important to know which defenses a robot can go over. Heading back over to the instructions, you'll see the next method we have to write is the get data point values method, which is located right below get empty match data. You'll see it looks a lot similar to the method we just wrote. That's because this method is responsible for telling the app how much each task is worth in points. So we can actually go back to the method we wrote and copy over everything. Be sure to do it exactly how I'm doing it. Now, using the game manual for the year, you can just input what each point value is for each task. Also, in this method, delete all the score attributes. They are not necessary for calculating point values. Because in 2016, breach and capture gave you no points in qualifications, I'm going to leave them at 0, which is totally fine to do. Your performance section will probably contain all zeros, because performance is mostly used for recording extra information. Once you finish inputting all the point values, we can look at instructions, and the next step is the get dependent data method. Dependent data consists of tasks only one team can accomplish in a match. For my project on the 2016 game, this game did not really contain any dependent data. The closest it comes is the breach and capture, which require 3 teams, but not 1. So I'm going to leave my method empty, just like this. Now that we're done with the server side, we can move on over to the client side of the template. The instructions say the first file we have to change is rankings.html. This page uses Firebase on the client side of the code to provide real-time updates to whatever ranking tables the user creates. In order to use Firebase, it needs to know the information listed right here for the config. To get this information, go to your Firebase console and into your project settings, and from there go to the config section and copy over the necessary information, which is the API key, the auth domain, and the project ID. We are now in the step which involves you creating the actual form which the users will use to scout teams. If you go back to the GitHub project, read through the instructions for index.html because there is certain code that is required in order for the page to run as intended. Read carefully the instructions and the examples for what class and ID each input requires. I also recommend you create your own paper scouting sheet beforehand to know what you want your app to look like. I'm going to create the index page for my app right now and show you the final product. Once you're all done working, like I am right now, you can deploy your app to its web page by typing in Firebase deploy. This will allow anyone to use the app by going onto the web page that it creates. As you're creating the app, I suggest using Firebase serve to host the app locally on your computer. This way you can see how it looks and test the input functions, although the server-side code may not work. I also recorded myself creating the index page. It took me about 20-30 minutes, but the time lapse didn't turn out so well, so I decided not to put in the video. For those new to HTML and Bootstrap, it may take you longer, but that's fine. As you practice more and get used to things, it'll become faster and easier for you too. Once it's done loading for you, it'll prompt you with the new web page it's created for the app. You can just go onto it by clicking on it. Now you'll see the app you've created on its own page. Since the app is deployed, the server-side code will work as well. We can use this method, get inputted data, to test if you correctly linked your index page to the server code we wrote earlier. If you had put in the correct IDs for each input as described in the instructions, then the code should work just fine. So input any value you want for all your inputs so you can test them all. And once you're ready, go to inspect element, and in the console write the following code. Once you run the code, you should see a match data object appear. It should be the same as what we wrote in the server-side code, except it should be filled with the data you have just inputted. Be sure to check each value. If a value is missing, double check the IDs you've written in your index.html page to make sure they match what you wrote in your server code exactly. If a value is incorrect, you may have given an input and ID that belongs to a different one, so double check that as well. If you added custom inputs, be sure you edited the get inputted data function correctly, as well as the reset function. It's all described in the instructions. Check this form multiple times to ensure the data is recorded correctly. So now that you know how to check to see if your code is working, I'm just going to go over some small adjustments I made to my code to give you some ideas for how to adjust the app for future years. First of all, I added this bit of JavaScript code to determine what type of defense a robot crosses. Each defense for this year is categorized as either group A, B, C, or D. So if a user marks a robot going under one, the category it is in gets marked without the user knowing. Also, if you had to add a totally different form of input other than the checkbox or numerical input that is default for the app, simply adjust the get inputted data function by adding an else if statement that saves the type of input you added. And adjust the reset function as well. Read the instructions for more details. Lastly, uncomment this line once you are done testing. Whenever you make changes to your code, do a Firebase deploy again to make sure your website is updated. Now that we are done programming the app, we can go ahead and test all its features. To do this, you need to set up an event. I'm going to use the Orlando Regional as a practice event. The only information the app needs to set up the event is the event ID, which can be found right here in the URL. Copy that event ID and navigate to the app. We have to go to the admin page, which is only accessible by typing in the URL and then inputting the event ID. Hit create event and the app will take care of the rest. It should create the event, the matches, and the teams within the server. And it'll show check marks once it's all done. Now that it's all done, we can go back to our Firebase console and we can navigate to the database. And now you'll see it filled with the event's information. It'll have the matches as well as all the teams. If you look at Blue Alliance, the data should match exactly what is shown on the Blue Alliance website. If you click on a team, you will see that it has an empty version of the match data object we created earlier. If you decide to add more data to track, you will have to delete the event from the database using the Firebase console and then reinitialize it from the admin page of the app, but doing so will make you lose any recorded data for the event. Going back to the app, we can now use all of its functionality. You may have to reload the cache on the Scout page. To do this on a Mac, press Command-Shift-R. And once you do that, the name of the event should appear, as well as all the matches that are in the event. If you click on a match, then the teams within the match will appear, and once you click that, the scouting form will appear. You can input any data you want as a test, and once you hit submit, it should update the database we have in Firebase. Just a reminder, once data is inputted, it cannot be changed without directly going into the console and changing the data. Now if we go to the rankings page, you will see that it has all the tasks you inputted in the server, and you can select any of these to see the current rankings for that task. Right now there's only one data inputted, which I just did. The tables page showcases the same data, but in the form of a spreadsheet. You can use this page to view the data, and you can also select all the choices and copy it over into your own spreadsheet if you would like. You can also sort this by task. Just click on the task at the top of the sheet. Next up is the match prediction page. To use this page, you can select a match and it'll automatically fill up these slots with the teams playing in a match, or you can create your custom match by selecting any team you want. Once you are ready, click Predict Winner, and using the data it already has, it will predict who the winner of the match will be. This is no way guaranteed, it is all just rough estimates with the purpose of giving you a sense of how the match will play out. Lastly, there is the Team Info page. This page is intended to allow you to view how a team has progressed throughout an event, and you can compare them against another team's progress as well. The app by default only shows the scores for each game period as graphs, but the instructions explain how to add more graphs if you want. Alright, that is all for this tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this app helps out our team for years to come. Please read the instructions very carefully to make sure everything works, but do not hesitate to contact me through Slack for questions or help.